No.
I used to run a nursery.
So Helen was running a nursery from home while I was working as a technical manager, and I took a voluntary severance package which enabled me to spend 18 months basically thinking of a way to avoid going back to work again. And I came up with the idea. I'd always been very interested in the idea of online communities. Helen had been telling me how little there was available for managers of nurseries to help them keep up with kind of changes in policy and procedures and so on and so forth. So I thought this would be a good reason for an online forum.
Also, I used to go off to training events. Running your own nursery is quite an isolating thing to do, and I used to go on training events. The local authority used to put on loads of training that was great, and I'd meet up with other people similar to me running their own settings who were all talking about the same things, and I would come home and moan to Steve about, I've met a really interesting woman, she runs a nursery 20 miles away, I'll probably never see her again, but we had this great conversation about X, Y and Z, and then it kind of felt flat. I didn't seem like I was supported, whereas when I'd been a teacher, you go in the staff room, you've got other professionals to talk about things with, and you just didn't have that when you're running your own very small nursery.
So it seems like a really good way to prove the concept of a way of joining the dots, which is how we referred to it at the time. And so I launched it, I set it up, I had to learn website design actually to do that. And within a very few weeks, people were flooding into it. So it really took off very, very quickly, and the concept was proven. So it grew, I think, through 2003, which is when it was launched, and it grew through 2004, and then picked up faster when local authorities picked it up, and we had tens of thousands of practitioners all chatting away like nobody's business.
And in the first couple of days, do you remember I had 5 different personas, and I was having a conversation with myself just to start it off, and then when the very first new people joined, it was just great because they weren't me, they weren't real people.
So, and in the early days, I mean, for the first 300 or 400 practitioners, I knew every member there, so I was able to join in the conversation as well. I think the art of making something like that work is to make it feel really populated, so answers to questions come as quickly as the questions themselves, and people genuinely feel part of a community. So that was what we tried to do, and emboldened by that, we started thinking of other things that we might be able to do. One of the other things had been, for many years, we'd heard on the forums so much about how long it took people to do the learning journals that they had started producing.
Yeah, when I had my nursery, I used to have staff meetings where we would cut out photographs of the children, we'd stick them in their individual learning journals. It was a great session with all the staff around it, but it took a couple of hours a week. Pritt sticks, sticking it all down, writing about the children, we shared it with parents. It was a lovely thing to do, but very time consuming. And the bigger the nursery and the more staff you've got, the more costly that whole system was.
Yeah, and if you can imagine, if you put yourself back 10, 15 years, they wouldn't be using smartphones back then. They would be using a digital camera from which they'd have to then download the digital pictures. They'd have to then print those out. They'd have to cut them and paste them into learning journals. And that there was a long, laborious procedure. And we thought, surely must be better ways to do this. The first tablets were emerging onto the market, and mobile technology just seemed to be up to the job, and that's how Tapestry was born.
The main purpose really was to celebrate what the children were doing in the setting with the parents and carers at home. That was the prime reason for doing it. So adding those photos and videos, parents would get pinged an email saying there's a new observation for your child. And parents would log on the way to work, on the way home from work. If they'd left a child crying in their nursery, they'd go to work feeling really miserable. They would then get pinged a little photo of their child, all settled, all happy. It was brilliant.
And that was the main. When it was 2011 that I started putting together the specification for it, and we launched on the 1st of October 2012, which makes us coming up to 7 years old. Yeah. So 2012 was when it launched, and it grew fairly quickly, but it really took off in years 3 and 4. And we were, until then, we'd been working from our homes. There were only 3 or 4 of us. And we just we slowly. Helen closed a nursery down in 2006, I think, and from then on we had a large chunk of the downstairs free. But slowly we started populating that until we ended up with 16 people working in the house, and virtually every room in the house was
We were queuing for
populated.
kettles, for loos, for,
Yeah. So it became really impractical to have us working from home. We then spent 2 or 3 years trying to find the right place to move into, and that's what we've just moved into this year. In fact, we've got our first, well, hopefully our only one, but our first purpose-built office block, which is a lovely listed building right in the middle of Lewes, and we have room probably for about 8 or 9 more people. We now have 25, so we've expanded considerably since we moved in here a few months ago.
Also in the building, we've got what used to be the old post office part at the front of the building, and we've turned that into a multimedia events room. So we've had our first Tapestry Education Conference in July, which was great, for 25 head teachers, advisors, inspectors, academics,
practitioners
and teachers and head teachers, and it was great. So we're going to be doing that 3 or 4 times a year. Also training, not just Tapestry training, but early years professional development training. So it's growing all the time, isn't it, really? It started off, I was an ex-primary teacher, a local authority advisor, and I'd been an Ofsted inspector for a few years. And we really wanted to keep that education knowledge growing all the time. And now I'm not in practice, I don't run my own nursery anymore. We certainly wanted to keep that in the team. So we now have a number of teachers right through from early years through Key Stage 1 and 2, here working in the team full time, so we always have that body of knowledge, so we know what we're talking about.